I feel like this Niners game has been absolutely insane just with referee stuff. But starting off right away, let's look at this play right here. So this is the very end of the game. This is a fumble caused by this guy right over here. You're going to see in a second. He's going to come in and he's going to try to punch the ball out. But instead of punching the ball out, what he does is he punches Kyron Williams in the face and then strips the ball, which is considered a fumble and a strip, which I always find kind of weird. But this does always beg the question whenever there is that, punch out situation. What happens if the punch doesn't land and instead you just punch him right in the face and then strip the ball? And that's exactly what happened here. You punch him in the face, strip the ball. It's within 2 minutes, so I guess the referees just didn't see this as a punch. And they thought that he just punched the ball because the trajectory of his arm, you could see, it looked like kind of like it's going to hit the ball. Instead, it completely just punches him in the face. Which, kind of questionable in the end to not call that, but I know it's a bang-bang play. It's very quick. It's a very, fast-paced action. So it's hard to call that, but it is. You see his head turn, which obviously does also indicate a little bit of like, why would his head turn? Oh, that's because the guy punched him in the face. So again, there's a lot of very questionable stuff during this game that I think a lot of people were upset with. One thing I love about football is that everyone can have a different opinion, and 1,000 people will tell you why you're stupid for having that opinion. And I learned that on, whenever a football game happens, always happens. So this way here was considered not a fumble, which I'm not going to get into whether this is a fumble or not, because at the end of the day, everyone has their different opinions, it feels like. But this is what's called not a fumble. Now, if this was a fumble, it would have been a fumble for 6. Just a little side note here. So this is a touchdown taken off the board. But you can see right here. Okay, so this guy right here, 31. It's kind of hard to see because he's right here. 31's going to run the football, right? He gets stopped. He gets pushed backwards. And then he fumbles it for 6, okay? Now, the whole thing about this is they called the whistle and they said his forward progress stopped. So you can see right here, he is going to have the ball. And by the way, Rams fans very upset about this play. He's going to get the ball right here. He goes backwards, ball gets ripped out. So he goes backwards at least like 2 or 3 yards, a solid 3 or 4 seconds before the ball gets ripped out. Obviously a play like this is going to cause a lot of controversy because this is a fumble for 6 in a very close game. But, he does go backwards. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, you shouldn't call the whistle that fast. You got to let the play out, right? And you go throughout history, there's so many times where referees would let this play out and they wouldn't call the whistle. So, in this type of game, you can't do that because, again, based on the history, this is, many times not called. Like, this whistle is not called, and they just call that a fumble. But they did say his forward progress was stopped, which, again, he is going backwards. So, I know Rams fans ticked off about this, but, the guy is going backwards. There is no forward progress anymore. At the end of the day, forward progress is not moving. So, I understand. I understand both perspectives, right? Well, what about the Niners in NFC Championship game 2011? They called that forward progress stopped when it wasn't. I get it. Understand completely. But, yeah, so this was an interesting game, man. Mac and Cheese had some injuries, which he apparently already was injured going into this game. So, there's some controversy as always coming out of this game, and as I'm making this game, the game is now going to overtime. So, as I'm making this video, the game is going to overtime. So we'll see how that ends up shaking out in the end. But controversy at its finest. I think the problem is, and this is my issue always with refereeing and referees in general, it's just the consistency. And I think that, you could have two identical plays. A play where a guy, like that fumble right there, last fumble I just showed you, where the guy gets pushed backwards and he runs backwards, whatever. And that could happen two different times. And one time they'll call it a fumble, one time they'll call it forward progress stopped. That, I think, is where we are as NFL fans, and why we get so ticked off about these things is because one time it could be called one way and the other time it could be called the other way, and they could be the exact same play. But the referees just call it a completely different way. And that's why I think fans get so ticked off, and why, referees, we always complain about them, because it's like, dude, how can you have two different plays and call them completely different? It just doesn't make sense. So they're in overtime right now. First and 10, Rams. 49ers are on the Rams side of the field. But anyway, tell me down below your thoughts, opinions. See you guys next one.